Hi, I'm Iris Fu, and your host for How'd You Do That? I'm an advisor at Bullseye Admissions and an incoming freshman at Stanford University studying computer science and economics. This season on How'd You Do That, we're sitting down with our network of Bullseye advisors to ask them about their accomplishments, successes, failures, and college journeys. Do you want to know how to get into an Ivy League as a first-gen low-income student? Or how to get into Harvard for both undergrad and medical school? The medical school has a 2% acceptance rate. What about how to get into the music industry? Win a Fulbright scholarship? We're diving into all these impressive feats and more this season to ask our advisors, how'd you do that? Hi Grant, welcome to another episode of How'd You Do That? Thank you for coming on today. So you have had some really amazing accomplishments. You got into Harvard for your undergrad and then you got into Harvard Medical School. So how did you do that? What do you think were the key factors that allowed you to make those accomplishments?
I don't think anyone really goes into any application process thinking, they're going to get into all their either dream schools or top schools. And so I think one of the most important things to do is really stay true to yourself. It takes a lot of hard work. There's a lot of studying that's involved to do well in both your classes as well as your grades and as well as your standardized test scores. But beyond that, I think the most important thing is just showcasing to them who you are as an individual. I loved playing the cello, and so music was a huge part of my application process as well as my life. Those were kind of things that I really like to highlight to show who I am as a person and what I like to do outside of the classroom as well. I think it's really important for students to kind of find those things that they feel really comfortable doing and then kind of showcase those in the application.
So what would you say is the biggest challenge that you faced while trying to do those two things, and how did you overcome them?
I think there's obviously a huge barrier. The biggest one I think is mental. And so going into this application process, knowing that it is highly competitive to get into these certain schools and not knowing whether, am I good enough to do it? Do I have what it takes? And where do I get started? I think is the first thing. Overcoming that mental barrier is the first step. And then just getting started, coming up with kind of a plan, saying, okay, what have other people done to be successful in this process? I really talked to a lot of students who were successful in the process beforehand and asked them for tips and tricks, asked them to read over my essays, asked them to talk to me about application strategy, and hearing kind of the advice from older students who had gone through the process, I think was really helpful.
What did you learn through the process that you wish you knew when you started?
I would have told myself that it's not worth stressing about during the process because you can only try your best. And moving forward and thinking about the future too much is a little bit stressful, and it's not necessarily the most productive thing in the world. And so I'm kind of just trying your best, trying your hardest, going through the process and not worrying too much about it, not stressing too much about it, I think is really important. And obviously no one can know what the outcome is going to be because a lot of the times admissions is very unpredictable, and all you can do is give it your best effort, honestly. So.
Great advice. So what's one thing about applying to Harvard that most people don't know about?
I think they really just want to showcase who you are as a person. And whenever I'm, advising my own students, when I'm working with them on their applications, I think it's really important to just highlight diversity and highlight who you are as an applicant and try and be as genuine as you possibly can within this application process. And so whether that is, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, whether you're a musician or whether you love playing sports or whether you're just a really nice person and you like getting along with a lot of people, just highlighting who you are as a person and not trying to be anyone who you aren't within the application process, because it's relatively easy to sniff out when you're reading these applications who is being actually genuine in their application and who isn't necessarily. And I think the most important thing, honestly, is when you get to kind of these really selective schools, they're just looking to read the application and see an application that really pops off the page and say, hey, this person is really interesting. I want to meet them in person, or I want them to be a part of my community. I don't think there's any one size fits all or one recipe to get into any of these schools. But I think the best thing, from an admissions point of view that, I didn't really think of, it's just really important to showcase yourself as far as, how you set yourself apart from all the other people. And this is applicable to any sort of schools that you apply to. And as far as being a student at Harvard, I was really pleasantly surprised at the diversity of students there, which is obviously kind of what they're going for. And the diversity also of kind of the experiences you can possibly have, because there is no one Harvard experience. Whenever someone says, how was your time at Harvard? I say, my time was phenomenal and my time was fantastic. I did a lot of music. I studied a lot of biology. I studied, a lot of sciences to get into medical school. But someone who does theater, dance, and media experiences a completely different experience than I did. And so the ability to really choose your own path and interact with different students, interact with different teachers, get involved in different clubs, have a different kind of social life is completely up to you. And so whenever anyone talks about Harvard, maybe it's this mysterious place, but it's actually, a really great institution in which you can choose your own path a lot of different ways.
You mentioned that the things that you really cared about were music and sports. Having them popular choices for extracurriculars, how were you able to make yourself stand out by focusing your application on those activities?
Sure. I think there's, a number of different ways in which you can make yourself stand out through extracurriculars. The most obvious one is you can do competitions as well. So if you're involved in music, there's many concerto competitions. You can try out for different orchestras and you can be involved in chamber music competitions. And so literally having accolades is one way you can stand out. Obviously, you don't have to be the best player in the world to help you stand out as an applicant. And so a lot of the ways you can also take music to stand out is maybe you want to start a group that goes around playing for charities or playing for nursing homes, or maybe you can be a musician who tries to teach people who may not have access to learning how to play instruments. And so there's any number of ways to really make yourself stand out as an applicant as far as a musician. And it's the exact same in sports. So either you can compete either on the state or the national level, but if you don't think you're at that level necessarily for any of these sports, there's plenty of different twists that you can take on it. Getting community members involved, really being very inclusive and kind of raising awareness for any sort of organization that you want to, kind of taking a twist on that and applying that to whatever sport or whatever kind of activity that you want to do.
I love that. Yeah, that's something I really work with my students on as well, is really taking initiative on the things that they like to do, and that really sets you apart. What has your experience been like as a Bullseye advisor?
Sure, I think it's been really, really great. Bullseye is a unique advising service in that we are all very close to the application process ourselves. We know what it's like to apply. We know what it's like to be stressed about the process, as well as we have our own small tips and tricks about the application process as well. Bullseye has been a great network, and on top of all of that, there's students from all these different schools, and I think that's really phenomenal about Bullseye as well. Being able to interact with other advisors from Duke or let's say Stanford or Princeton, and getting their perspectives on a lot of these different issues is really great. And being able to bounce ideas off of them when talking to students as well, I think is a real asset. As far as working with students, I've really enjoyed my experience so far. All of the students I've worked with are very motivated, they're very self-directed, and I think that's really incredible. Probably the most meaningful experience to me has been working through the Bullseye Scholars Program and kind of working with a lot of these students who might not necessarily have access to college advising and helping them through the process and really seeing their ultimate success at the end of the day. It's been honestly just really fulfilling for me, and it's been really great to see a lot of them get into some of the places that they wanted to get into.
Grant, what has been your favorite moment as a Bullseye advisor?
I think, when one of my students got a full ride to Bowdoin College and we worked on his essays a lot, we'd revise them probably 10 or 11 times and spent a lot of time together, had talked a lot about the college admissions process, and finally having that, full ride to Bowdoin was really just an amazing experience. And I felt like hopefully I had made a difference within the application process, and it was just a really great time.
All right. So how do you think getting into Harvard and, going to medical school now has impacted you as an advisor, and did it inform what you brought to the table?
Sure. I think I've definitely learned a lot about applying to schools and applying to any program actually through doing a lot of applications. Definitely through medical school, I applied to over 20 medical schools. And so you have a lot of essays to write. You have a lot of things to think about when you're applying to these things. But I think honestly, the most important thing that I came away with was that the school that you go to or the institution that you end up at really doesn't define you as a person. And it's really what you do when you get there, and it's what you do along the way. And even potentially things that don't work out the way you think they're going to work out are the most important parts of the entire process. And for example, for every school that I got into, I didn't get into a lot of schools as well. And so learning from those mistakes, learning from every application that didn't work out, I think was a great way to kind of pick yourself back up and try a little bit harder, tweak what you're doing a little bit more, and then kind of come up with a goal to see how you can improve yourself. And so I like to tell my students, This process is completely unpredictable. No one knows why you get into one school or why you don't get into another school, but all you can do is try your hardest and not take it too personally at the end of the day, because you'll probably end up, at a great place no matter what. And then it's what you do when you get there, and you can make the most of it. You can still become a doctor no matter where you go. You can still become a lawyer. You can still become a teacher. You can still become a musician. You can do anything you want. And college is kind of just an entry point, and it's the starting point, and it's a gateway to open up all these possibilities for you. So.
Yeah, I second that so hard. So so many students think college is the end goal, but it's really just a stepping stone to everything else in life. Awesome. So now kind of circling back a little bit to your medical school application experience, if you could only give 3 tips to anybody trying to apply to medical school, what would they be?
Sure. Applying to medical school, I like to say, is kind of like applying to college, but on steroids. The most important thing is to plan ahead for the medical school application. If you know you want to be pre-med, definitely think about all the requirements that you have to do to get into medical school. So making sure that you can plan those out, all those course requirements, as well as kind of enjoy the process along the way, have a social life, be able to do extracurriculars, spend time with family. So planning is very important. So that's number one. I guess the second thing would be try really hard. Your grades are actually very important when you're going into medical school. I think it's not about necessarily overloading your schedule with the hardest courses ever and getting straight A's in all of them. So this circles back also to step one of planning. If you plan your courses out so that you're not taking maybe organic chemistry, linear algebra, as well as all these hard courses at the same time, you can take bits and pieces at a time and then try as hard as you can in each of those sectors without overloading yourself. And so kind of planning ahead, trying really hard in all of your courses, trying to excel in everything that you're doing. And then the last step is not getting too bogged down in the process, because there's a lot to think about when you're doing medical school applications. There's a lot to say, I need this sort of GPA, I need to get this score on the MCAT, but also, just as it is with the college application, staying true to yourself, knowing if you like playing music, you should continue playing music, knowing if you love going on hikes, you should continue going on hikes, and you should make time for your friends, because ultimately at the end of the day, people who want to go into medicine are there to do it to help other people. And you can't really lose that side of your ultimate goal and think, I'm so goal-oriented that I'm going to kind of shut off myself from everything just so I can get into this one school. You have to remember, I'm doing this so I can serve others and so I can help other people. And as long as you keep that goal, I think that'll help you through all the rough patches along the way.
If students don't know if they want to do pre-med or not, should they go into college starting the pre-med tracks just so they have that? Or should they just test it out? And is it okay to not do pre-med and still get into medical school?
Yeah, it's completely fine not to know what you want to do coming into college. I personally didn't think I wanted to go to medical school all the way up until kind of sophomore, junior year. And so you can definitely get a late start on it. In fact, it's becoming more and more common to take 1 or 2 years or even more off after college before you go into medical school, either to do some research in a lab or at a hospital, or if you hadn't done any of the pre-med requirements during college, you can do what's called a post-bac program and kind of take those science courses in those 2 years before you apply to medical school. So it's definitely not too late to decide you want to go into medicine afterwards. That being said, I think if you have any idea or an inkling that you do want to go into medicine, I think it's definitely a good idea to try out some science courses once you get into college and kind of feel out the pre-med curriculum, say, is biochemistry something that's interesting to me? Am I interested in human physiology and anatomy? That's basically how the body works. Am I, interested in being a lifelong learner? Because throughout medicine, you have to be constantly learning. You're taking tests throughout your entire life, actually, and you're always doing new research. And so I think these are things to definitely think about.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to join our show today. I hope the viewers who are watching this took something away. And yeah, Grant, thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
Bullseye has an incredibly talented network of advisors, and Grant is no different. From getting into Harvard Medical School to playing music, he's truly one of a kind. I hope you guys took something out of this episode about working hard, doing your own thing in college, and the process of getting into medical school. It's no easy feat, but hopefully with Grant's advice and the insights that he shared in this episode, you guys took something away and are on your way to achieving your own goals. Next week, we'll be sitting down with Anya, who graduated from Duke and is very successful in the startup world, to talk about her experience spearheading initiatives and starting her own startup. I hope you guys enjoyed, and we'll see you guys on the next episode of How'd You Do That?